Hi everyone, it's Liam here from Rating the Races. So over the next so many videos, I'm going to highlight my horses to follow for the National Hunt season of 2020-2021. Hopefully we get an uninterrupted National Hunt season and COVID can be kept under control. We can start getting crowds back, but only when safe to do so. Now I'm going to break all these videos down by trainer, so I'm going to have recorded, just counting them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 videos across for my horses to follow. The first one is going to be this one, which is the Nicky Henderson the Nicky Henderson horses, and hopefully that just means you don't have to listen to a 30-minute video. And I can keep them a lot shorter. So let's get stuck into it. And the first horse I'm going to talk about is Shishkin. Now, I know he is boring as a horse to follow. He is boring. I'm sure he'll make plenty of people's lists, and everyone knows about him. He won the Supreme Novice, having won 2 previous hurdles. He fell at Newbury and he'd won a bumper at Kempton. Now, why do I put him in my horses to follow then? For me, I think he could be one or two stars of the season this season. I do think a fence will suit him, but I almost think if he'd won at Newbury instead of falling, he would be getting even more respect. I think Shishkin is an absolute machine. I really do. I think he's very, very good. When he won at Cheltenham at the festival, he was hampered 2 out, and yet he still picked up Chantry House, Abacadabras, Asterion Phalange, who I believe between them will all have a Grade 1 win at the end of the season. Asterion Phalange already did. Abacadabras I think had in Ireland. Chantry House I think will win a Grade 1 this season as well. So I think that is very, very good form, and he still managed to pick them up. He ran them down. He was strong at the finish. I don't see any negatives about him, and I think he could be the next RTR. I really do rate him that highly. He made our horses to follow last season, having won this race at Kempton, and I did highlight the Supreme Novice for him. However, after he won at Huntingdon, I got confused and I thought maybe he was going for the Ballymore, or the Neptune as I think it's now called. Which way around is it? It's now called the Ballymore. Anyway, I thought he was going to step up to the 2.5 mile hurdle. They didn't. They dropped him back to 2 miles, and he was impressive in the right places towards the end of the race. From turning in to being a few lengths off them, to then closing up and being level with Abacadabras jumping the last, that was very, very impressive for me, and I think we could see him going all season unbeaten, winning the Arkle, and then people going, wow, this is a superstar. And I don't really think they're doing that quite as much at this present time. I think they will be at the end of the season. I think they'll be really raving about him. I think everybody will, and I really, really do believe he is that good. But he is a boring one, and hopefully my future ones coming up are not going to be as boring. The second horse that I want to talk about is a horse called Allart. Now, as you've just heard me say, I think the Supreme Novice form is very, very strong. Shishkin, Abacadabras, Chantry House and Asterion Phalange. Back in 5th was Allart. Now, if you asked people to name the front 5 in the Supreme Novice, they'd probably get 1st, 2nd and 3rd quite quickly. 4th they'd have to think about, and then they'd go, oh yeah, it was the Irish one that was jumping out to the right all the time. I wonder how many of them could name Allart's was 5th. Now the reason I say that is he was given a very quiet ride. He was 33 to 1, and he never really got involved. But he stayed on well. He ran on past potentially some beaten horses and just past some decent horses. And I think he's very, very good as well. He'd only had the 2 runs over hurdles at Ludlow and Doncaster. We'd only had the 2 wins at Ludlow and Doncaster. And they were nothing races. I mean, he went off 8 to 11 and 1 to 5. He had nothing to beat. He didn't learn anything. It wasn't until he came to Cheltenham that he actually learnt and had a proper race. Now that he's had a proper race, I think he could return to graded company and run much better. But he's only got a handicap mark of 142 at the moment, and I think in handicap company he would be very, very competitive. The intermediate handicap at Newbury looks the obvious starting point for me, and I think you could see him potentially running in something like potentially the Greatwood Hurdle or the Betfair Hurdle, or they could aim him at the County Hurdle at the end of the season. But I think by the end of the season he'll be back into graded company. Potentially the Champion Hurdle. I don't think he'll be good enough to win the Champion Hurdle, but I think he'll have a handicap mark too high by then to think about running in a County Hurdle. So he's one I like for handicaps this year, especially on his first couple, and then hopefully returning to graded company. The third horse from the Nicky Henderson stable is a horse called Burrows Edge. Now, Burrows Edge caught my eye at Kempton when he won. Not because he won, but because of how he was ridden that day. I thought he was ridden almost to not win the race. He was held up out the back and was travelling really well. The action started developing up front. They started to get racing. Nicky de Boinville didn't panic at all, didn't do anything. Coming round the final bend, he's still quite a few lengths off him, and he's going wide. Still, Nicky de Boinville hasn't moved. But the horses were getting away from him, or were trying to get away from him in front, and Nicky de Boinville was not doing anything on him. As it happened, the front 2 both fell at the last, and I think that almost left Burrows Edge in front accidentally. Now, I know that's quite potentially a controversial statement, but I think he won that race accidentally, and he was meant to be having that as a run to save him for something else. And I think that something else may have been Aintree. I don't think Cheltenham quite suits him, and obviously they had Dame de Compagnie for Cheltenham, and I think they'd already got that planned by then. And I think they were going to aim for Aintree. Obviously, with COVID happening, Aintree didn't happen. So they ended up running at Cheltenham, and considering he'd won either very impressively or by accident at Kempton, given a hold-up ride, why did they then change his tactics at Cheltenham? That just confused me. They were a lot more prominent. They kicked for home much sooner. I think he jumped the last and went into the lead at the last. That doesn't make sense. Why were they kicking for home at the second last at Cheltenham, but were prepared to wait even longer at Kempton, where Kempton's an easier track. 2.5 mile doesn't feel like 2.5 mile. 2.5 mile at Cheltenham on soft feels like further than that. So why were they going for home so early? I think because Cheltenham wasn't the plan, and he'd just been thrown in that as another horse that we're just in case something goes wrong with Dame de Compagnie. This season, I think we might find that he's still well handicapped, and the Lanzarote is obviously going to be another target again in January. Let's have a look what it was worth last season. It was worth 25,000. Now I think this year it might be worth a little bit less because of the loss of revenue for the courses and so on. So they may target something a bit bigger. And the race that really catches my eye for Burrows Edge is the 2.5 mile handicap at Aintree. Granted that that's at the end of the season, but some of these trainers really do think that far in advance, and I think you have to. You have to be looking at a big target and work your way back, rather than sometimes they run in a pointless race for £4,000, £5,000, they win it, and they go up £6. You're like, well, that was pointless running in that and winning £6,000, because now we're £6 higher, and now we're going to run in a £35,000 race for the winner, that is. but we're £6 higher. So I think sometimes they need to be thinking in advance, and hopefully that's what they're doing here with Burrows Edge. And I'd like to hope that he runs at Aintree at the end of the season. The final horse from my Nicky Henderson horses is one called French Crusader. Now, there's a handicap at Newbury that I mentioned earlier that I think Allard could run in, called the intermediate hurdle. It's a listed race for horses rated 0 to 155, and this race for me is one of the best handicaps going forward. I always look at the form from this race and really give it a lot of respect. And that was before last year, and obviously last year it worked out fantastic with the winner going on to win the Champion Hurdle. French Crusader was only getting £2 that day from Epatante. Now would be getting, I don't know, like £10 or something. He finished second, having won at Newbury. He's lightly raced. He did suffer an injury, which did put him out for the early months of 2020. But he might not have actually had a race because he does want good ground, or good to soft ground. You can see he got taken out on soft and heavy going at Ascot and Kempton. But if he gets good ground and he's running a handicap, I think he could be very, very good. And I think he's one that I think is well ahead of his mark currently. And our ratings kind of do demonstrate that. Let me show you. When he was meant to run at Ascot, we can see that he got a rating, an RTR score of 186. That would have made him clear top rated ahead of Not So Sleeping, where the rating's actually got a nice 1, 2, 3 in the Bet for Exchange trophy. So a feature handicap, he would have been clear top rated in front of horses that, you know, Not So Sleepy had been very, very impressive the time before. Then he was meant to run at Kempton, and once again he was going to get a rating of 196. Elusive Bell got 175, and Elusive Bell would have been RTR 2. French Crusader would have been clear top rated. So if they run him in a handicap, I think he'll be clear top rated, and I don't think it matters what handicap. I really don't. I think the Betfair Hurdle could well be a target. The Greatwood Hurdle could be something in the more immediate path to him. The only issue is he hasn't run since November 2019, so he may need a run to get him right for a big handicap. And you may find that maybe the Ascot race, if they get better ground, could well be a target. You know, it was worth 85,000 last year. Granted, it's not going to be worth as much this year, but it is a good handicap and certainly worth winning. And that could be where they go instead with him at the beginning of the season. I hope he can progress into graded company, but he could win a couple of handicaps before then. So they are my 4 Nicky Henderson horses. Shishkin, I think he can go all season unbeaten and win the Arkle and be talked of as the next Altior. Allard, I think, is very well handicapped, and I think he could pick up one of these big handicap hurdles if they don't send him chasing. Burrows Edge, I think they will work backwards from the end of the season, potentially Aintree, and see what happens before then, with the Lanzarote being an obvious target. And French Crusader, I think, could be aimed at either the Greatwood Hurdle or the Ascot handicap, with, if they wanted to give him a whole season to get fitness, the County Hurdle could obviously be a target for him. So they're my 4. Thanks for listening. Any suggestions, any feedback, do get in touch, and the next video will be talking about the Gordon Elliott horses to follow. Thank you.